everybody!
Hi, so fair warning, this is going to be a long video, definitely the longest that we've ever done, but we've been talking about doing this video for a long time and keep putting it off, and we finally just need to do it. So, for anyone who does not know us, I'm Steven, this is my wife Carly, and we're going to be talking about everything that has happened in our story so far with Aria, with the pregnancy, with the hospital stays, basically everything that's the reason why this channel exists. So, you want to start off?
Sure, yeah, so we're going to be talking about the blessings, the struggles, the things in between. We want to kind of preface this, I guess, a little bit by saying, like, we've been married 7 years, and...
almost 7.
Yeah, almost 7 years. And was there anything else you wanted to add to before we actually got started?
I don't guess so. I mean, we were married for about 5 years before all this started.
Yep. So to begin with, we're gonna, I'm kind of reading off of notes, but so we're, to start everything off, we actually had a first pregnancy before we had Aria. We got pregnant, but we had a miscarriage at 5 weeks. I was hurt because before getting pregnant, I spent a lot of time praying about whether we should have a child or not, because Steven didn't actually want one, but I had a growing desire for one, and so I put in a lot of prayer and fasting, and I thought that God had indicated to me in various ways that I was meant to be a mom, and then I lost the baby. So from this, I ended up spending a lot of time in prayer afterwards too, and a lot of time with God. I cried, I questioned, I submitted daily to God. I went through a lot of emotions. Then comes the second pregnancy. Not long after that first one, we got pregnant with Aria. We were, of course, worried every day, unsure if we were going to lose her. And what's cool, though, was I was led to people who had similar situations, including people I did freelance work for and others, and I talked to them about it, and we were able to have, like, good conversations about it. I was worried, and I prayed for Aria constantly. One day, I was praying through the house, just kind of walking through the house, and I was in our guest room at the time, which I rarely go into. And God revealed to me through this little decorative statue that was given to me by a wonderful lady at church that Aria would be well. And just about every day after that, I declared that Aria would be well. And this comes important later in this testimony that we have too. So, do you want to start the...
Yeah, sure. So the pregnancy started off, like the second pregnancy started off seeming to go everything just fine. The ultrasounds looked good, up until the 24 weeks mark. Then we started seeing, a specialist more frequently because they were seeing some signs of just wanting to monitor things more. They detected elevated protein in Carly's lab work and higher blood pressure, some slight swelling. Nothing alarming by itself, but they just wanted to monitor it more. A week or so later, they at another appointment, they were still seeing concerning signs, so they drew blood to send to a lab to be tested. And I think it was maybe 2 days later, you called your doctor to say, hey, my ankles are really swollen today. Is there anything I should do? Should I come in or anything? And I think her response was, oh, well, I was actually about to call you anyway because we got your lab work back and you need to go to the hospital. Like, right now.
Yep. Yep. All of it kind of came together, and they're like, hey, you got to go now.
Yeah,
you we checked out.
Yeah. At first we were asking, like, well, for how long? Because at first we thought it was just for more tests. Like, is it going to be the rest of the day? And said, no, it'll be at least 24 hours.
And then it ended up being for 2 weeks. And every...
Well, not just for 2 weeks. They, before the end of that first 24 hours, they said, you will be at this hospital until you deliver.
Yes. Which it ended up being 2 weeks later. And in that 2 weeks, every day, actually multiple times a day, they were checking my blood work. I had bruises on my arms just for how frequently they were checking my blood work, because they wanted to make sure that my body or Aria, like, they were basically seeing if my body or Aria was being severely affected and if they needed to intervene. But thankfully they did that, even though I had all the bruises, because they caught the problem when it did happen. I ended up with something called HELP syndrome, which is, I might butcher this, hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, and the low platelets. My blood platelet count was already low, we knew that, but the morning of December 27th, my enzymes were really, really high, and that's when they decided, like, hey, we have to deliver Aria. It is unsafe for you. So I'm grateful for this because, one, some women have issues that show up immediately and they need surgery ASAP. I did not. Two, I had time to get steroid shots that were for Aria, actually, to help Aria's lungs, and time for a 24-hour magnesium drip, which was to help prevent seizures due to worsening preeclampsia and to prevent injuries to a preterm baby's brain. So for the delivery at exactly 28 weeks,
literally to the day,
they conducted a non-emergency C-section under general anesthesia. There's a funny story from this. My brother, like, was living in another state, and he came down so he could help Stephen out, like, so Stephen would know that someone was there. Stephen could go home for a couple hours, freshen up, come back. And so the night of the 26th, my brother told me he was going home in the morning, and he said that I needed to not go into delivery as soon as he left, and I needed to stay pregnant for another couple weeks.
And being the younger sister,
I delivered less than 24 hours later.
He was still at the airport.
Yeah, he was still at the airport. That morning of the delivery, I talked to several doctors. We knew that Aria wouldn't survive a regular birth, and a regular C-section was not an option because of my low platelet count. I could possibly bleed out too much. So they conducted a non-emergency C-section under general anesthesia.
We say non-emergency, but at 7 a.m. they were telling us, hey, your enzymes are really elevated. You're going to have this baby by 9.
Yeah. Yeah, I say non-emergency because it wasn't like, oh my gosh, we're going to rush you in there right now. It was maybe an hour or two later. But either way, I was terrified. I don't like the idea of being under anesthesia. Like, that scared me so much. Thankfully, I was able to call someone I did work for who had also given birth under general anesthesia, and she gave me the encouragement that I needed. Another aspect about this was that Aria was so small, they weren't sure, like, what kind of incision they were going to have to make or anything like that. But Aria was in the best position possible, so the incision was smaller than they expected, and the direction of the cut was considered ideal for them. So that was nice.
Yeah. And the incision was only about, like, about yay size. So she was a very small baby.
She was tiny. Post-delivery, I recovered in the hospital for 4 days, and I did eventually get to see Aria before I was discharged. Thankfully, Stephen was such a blessing in that time because he was trying to be with me as I was recovering, but also was going and seeing Aria. So kind of like back and forth between me and Aria. So you were such a blessing. Thank you.
I didn't write that part.
Yeah, it's great.
I just want to clarify, I did not write that.
And then, so it doesn't end there, right?
No, nothing can be simple, can it?
No, it can't. 12 days after surgery, on Sunday morning, I woke up around 4 a.m. with my chest not feeling quite right. This is actually a feeling that I have felt one time before, back in 2018, because I had myocarditis. Back then, I woke up with a similar feeling and went to the hospital, and it felt just like that, but with a little more pain. At the hospital, they did it was an ECG.
I think EEG.
Whatever it was that they put on your chest, and they're
I think it was EKG.
They're like, you look like you're an 85-year-old man based on this, and they hooked me up to a defibrillator, expecting me to have a heart attack at any moment. And then they took me to have a heart catheter done so they could see if I had a tear in my heart, a hole in my heart, because pregnancy puts a lot of strain on the heart, and they were worried that maybe something happened, and that's what they were seeing. It didn't show any tears. It didn't show a heart attack. And for this, Stephen has kind of his own, testimony of this moment.
So, well, first off, we got her to the hospital, attached the defibrillator to her, every doctor and nurse and technician in the room was very on edge because it just looked like she should be falling in the floor at any minute now. And so I was told that she may have a hole in her heart or she's about to have a heart attack. And then I was put in a waiting room alone without seeing another person for an hour and a half. But during this time, I was in communication with our pastor, with my parents, with Carly's parents, with our church family, and our pastor told us that he was having the church pray, and the time that he said that their prayer was taking place was the exact time in the heart catheter procedure that Carly said that all of the pain and discomfort just melted away, and that was when they started saying that we're not seeing anything wrong.
Yeah, so when they put the heart catheter in, I think they also did some kind of like dye through it or something, and there was all of a sudden just all the pressure that I could feel in my chest just vanished. And yeah, it hit about the time that he said that everybody was praying. So
I think it was the exact minute, and
yeah, that was amazing. And so now, while in the cardiology unit, because I had, after that, they still kept me there for a few days. They had to monitor me. My arm had to be treated like it was broken when you get a heart catheter through.
The catheter line went up through her artery starting in her forearm, so until that heals and closes, you can't bump it on anything, you can't do anything to dislodge what's keeping your artery closed.
Yeah, they have a whole thing taped to my arm, and so, but I was also like pumping and doing mom things, and so I had a female nurse who was helping me through all of that. Thankfully, she had been a mom, and I met another female nurse while there and both of them helped me in that time. They gave me tips as moms themselves, and I thought it was just funny because I was getting mom and baby tips from the cardiology unit, which was really cool and really interesting.
It's like, this is not our normal field. This is not the conversation we normally have in this unit.
But here we are. After all that, they did determine that I have myopericarditis. Now, this is the second time having it, which is really unusual.
Within 5 years.
Yep, within 5 years. It's really unusual for anyone to get it once. And I don't know entirely what it means. I do know that basically I have an inflamed heart, and normally that's caused by an infection. Like an infection, instead of attaching to normal places like lungs and stuff like that, it attaches to your heart, and it can cause a lot of problems. But there were no signs of an infection for either instance of this. And I had to rest for 3 months and then be checked out again and all that. But the cardiologist there, he said that I was the zebra in the pasture of cows.
Sorry, I'm distracted because there's a cat staring through our window. Not our cat either.
Oh boy. So back to this. The cardiologist called me the zebra in the pasture of cows here in Georgia. Basically what it meant by that is I am not a typical patient, and I'm not.
I think the first time you had myocarditis in 2018, the doctor at that hospital told you that you were his only patient below the age of 50. And she was 21 at the time. Yep.
So, yeah. Now, and that doesn't quite end there either. A week after that incident, on Sunday morning around 9 a.m., I had a stroke. I believe the enemy was trying to keep me away from church, family, and friends, because I hadn't been back at church since the middle of December, and now it's January 15th. We were prepping.
We were literally getting ready to go to church.
Yep.
We were in the process of getting showered, dressed, all of that, and I was talking to Carly, and she just stopped responding. She didn't really respond to what I said. I have no idea what I was saying at the time now, but and when I asked her if she was okay, she didn't look at me. She just kind of had her head down and I couldn't get her to look me in the face. And then she was able to walk across the room and sit down. And so then I went and got down on the floor and looked up in her face, and only one side of her face was moving. The other side would not move at all. So at that point, I called 911 and got the paramedics to come. By the time they arrived, she was able to speak again, or...
Basically, they didn't have to intervene with any medication. It kind of resolved on its own, thankfully. And I don't seem to have like any long-lasting effects from it. There is evidence that I had a stroke.
Not a TIA or
no, it was
anything like that. It was
a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was literally like the heart thing happened on a Sunday. That happened on a Sunday, literally a week later. And at this point, my faith was like extremely low and perhaps even non-existent. Thankfully, Stephen was with me, and like he said, he could discern what was going on, and he was able to call emergency services. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days in the neurology unit. There we told our story about Aria to one of the nurses, and she was really touched by it. She nearly cried. Another person who was part of the transport team, meaning they transport patients like they in a wheelchair wherever they need to go.
Between departments within the hospital.
Yeah. And she transported me to the NICU, and she was able to see the babies in the NICU. Like, she'd never been in the NICU before, and it was really cool. Like, she was really happy about it. She was touched by it. So God was using us even in that second unit of the hospital, you know, another place unrelated to moms and babies. And it's like cardiology, neurology. God was still using us and touching lives, which was really cool. But even though like my faith was really shaken at that point, there was just a lot going on. But with Aria, like spiritually, like in regard to Aria, like I had the most trust for like Aria at the time. Myself, maybe not so much, but with Aria, I was just like, yeah, she's going to be taken care of. She is good to go. I didn't worry about her. I believed that God was going to keep her and make her well. And I think this comes important later. So that's kind of where we were spiritually, but kind of transitioning back to Aria now. When Aria was born, she started off actually with no oxygen. There was a nurse that actually said to us, like, what am I, well, maybe not to us directly, but she told us that she said, what am I supposed to do with her? Like, because she didn't need to help her. She was good. They're used to
She
babies.
came out bright red and screaming 12 weeks early.
Woo! A couple of days later, she did end up needing some non-invasive form of oxygen, like the little tubes in her nose and stuff like that. And Aria did pretty good up until her first infection. Then her lungs just couldn't seem to catch back up. With most NICU stays, there are ups and there are downs. There are days of wins and many days of uncertainties. She recovered from 2 sicknesses, I believe, and then she got a third, and it was actually like at that point that they couldn't help her anymore. Like, she was requiring more than they could give. They could make her stable, but that was all they could do. They had to send her somewhere else. So we got a call overnight, which
at
is
about 2 a.m.
Which is kind of a recurring thing with her. That's when a lot of our calls happen, that they would have to transport her elsewhere. So they tried one hospital, which is the hospital she's at now, actually, but they were full. So they had to send her to a hospital that's 2 hours away from where we live. And so yeah, when she got to this first specialty hospital, she was in a very fragile state upon arrival. There was like a solid month where we could have like little interaction with her. She was constantly sedated, even paralyzed, so she wasn't fighting the ventilator. And it was hard. She was rarely awake. You go see your child, but all you can do is like hold their little hand or touch their little foot. You can't really do much else with them.
I don't think we could do anything else for those 4 weeks.
Yeah. Early on, the doctors mentioned the possibility of a trach, just seeing her state and everything. But we'd also heard stories where parents chose not to and ended up working out for them. One story I heard in particular was that God healed their child and they ended up not needing that like extra support from a trach, and they healed from it. It was great. So at the time, like, I really trusted God to heal her. And it was a little bit of a struggle at the same time, though, because I also really thought that she was going to make it out of the first hospital and come home, and she didn't, right?
Yeah, our initial expectation was that she would have been home by the end of March.
Yep.
Her original due date was March 21st. She ended up being born on December 27th instead. And initially, for the first few weeks, we had every expectation, really for the first month or two, we had every expectation that she would come home before the end of March.
Yep.
The point where she was transferred to the second hospital was in the first half of February.
Mm-hmm. Wait, you said she was transferred in the first half of February? I think she was transferred actually in the second half of February, like the end of it.
I don't feel like doing the math right now. She was either 8 or 9 weeks old at the time.
It was in February. But kind of bringing us back to where we were, we thought that she was, going to be healed. We ended up needing to make a choice. We did choose to trach her. That was really hard. Like that
we requested tests be done before making that decision. We sought a lot of counsel because we genuinely, truly did not want to have to go that route.
Yep.
We did not want for her to have invasive surgery. We did not want for her to have this foreign object in her body to sustain her life.
Yep.
But there was no good alternative.
So a week before surgery was planned to happen, she actually kind of proved to us that she needed that surgery done. She was tired of that tube in her mouth, and I think her body was developmentally at the point where it's like, oh, I know that this tube doesn't need to be in my mouth anymore, and she needed a lot of meds to get her to calm down. So she was
constantly agitated. She was either asleep or angry.
Yep. And also the surgery had to be a good thing, but it wasn't easy. Immediately after surgery, no one told us what to expect. They didn't tell us hey, she's gonna look really swollen. Hey, she's gonna look really pale. She looked rough after surgery. Did
not look like the same baby.
So that was really hard. And 2 weeks went by, and we started to see that this seemed to be the right decision. But it took some time for us to really get that confirmation, because she was on a lot of meds, and they were still having to be really careful with her. And it was just oh boy, it just felt, it was hard for us. It was a hard time for us to go through and to see her that way. Eventually she did get better. And in fact, we were, let's see, what did I write? In fact, we were talking with doctors. Okay, yes. We had talked to the doctors about her possibly staying until she was a year corrected age, which would be, or a year old, anywhere from December to March, which was a really long time, 6 more months. And then miraculously she got better, and she was able to come home at the end of July, which was really nice.
Yeah, I think the conversation was the doctors had a meeting with us telling us that we needed to expect for Aria to be in the hospital for an additional 6 to 9 more months. And less than 2 weeks later,
she miraculously got better.
Less than 2 weeks later, they were saying, we might send you home in 2 weeks.
So then while she was at home, actually, real quick. So while Aria was at the hospital, we were also trying to figure out my health concerns. What caused this heart inflammation twice in my life with no known cause? What caused a stroke? Possibly the miscarriage as well. Are all these related? I went to so many specialists.
Let's see, it was a neurologist, at least 2 different cardiologists, a hematologist, which is a blood doctor,
a rheumatologist, which is the main one. Everybody kept saying, hey, go see a rheumatologist, go see a rheumatologist. And those are really hard to go see. I was on a waiting list to go see one. And so I finally didn't get to go see rheumatology, though. And they deal with autoimmune diseases where the body attacks itself and stuff like that. So it looked like, what they said was that it looks like I have the consequences of lupus, but not the daily, things of lupus, certain rashes and things like that. So we started me on treatment for that, knowing that this isn't a perfect, this doesn't fully line up, but this is what we're going to treat you for because this is what we have right now. Yeah. And I also had MRIs done, different other tests done, lots of blood work taken from different doctors just to really try to figure out what's going on.
And all this with us traveling back and forth each week between home so that I could work for at least part of the week, and then back to the hospital that Aria was staying at, which was 2 hours away from our house. And trying to decide, well, where do we have all these tests and procedures done? Do we have them done near Aria or near home?
Yeah. So, but now to kind of get back on track with Aria, her being at home. So at home, she made a lot of improvements in her development. Her respiratory status got better. Everything got better. She was very happy, very smiley. It was a joy for 7.5 weeks. Then we started going down on one of her benzo medications, which is really addictive. And it seemed like she had severe withdrawals, and she was struggling like with a respiratory status. So we took her into a children's hospital closer to where we live.
It was actually the hospital that she, the first hospital wanted to transfer her to this hospital, but at the time they were full.
Right. So then when we took her in, they discovered that she had a plug in her trach, meaning that her airway was blocked.
It was partially blocked. It had an opening in it that was about the size of a coffee straw that she was able to breathe through.
Very small.
Yeah, but it does seem like the withdrawal from the medication was still the primary trigger for her agitation, because it would always be at the same time of day that it would start.
Yeah.
Which was always whenever we would give her that reduced dose of this sedative. Yep.
So they kept her to monitor that exact thing. They wanted to monitor her coming off of medication. They kept wanting to send her back home, knowing that like we had her at home, and they were like, well, we really want to help you guys get her back home and all this stuff. But it affected her respiratory status so much that every time they're like, hey, we think we're going to send her home, they couldn't. They're like, we just don't feel comfortable because we don't want you coming back immediately after we send you guys home. We don't want to set you up for failure. So, and I struggled with this. I questioned God. I questioned like what the word faith meant, because like I thought I had faith and it seemed gone. I asked myself, what do you do when people tell you that God, what do you do when people telling you that God loves you isn't enough anymore? Because it wasn't for me. People could tell me that, and I'm like, well, if this is what God's love feels like, I don't know, right? I wish I could say I was strong through it all. I wasn't. Some days I prayed because I still believed in God, like that he existed, but I prayed out of submission. It wasn't a want in my heart. I didn't trust his character. He was still God, but not the God that I used to know. I was in a spiritual turmoil for a long time, and one day at the beginning of November, I wrote down a declaration, and I can include it in the description in this video, but it was about, I choose to believe. Our circumstances didn't change, but I had to make a change. Am I going to walk away from God, or am I going to choose God? And I chose God. It was still hard some days, but I reminded myself to choose him every day. And there could be many conversations as to why I chose this. For some watching, me saying I chose God because God is good, it may not be enough for you to hear. You want to hear examples, you want to hear specifics, but I probably shouldn't take the time to go into all those because of how much time this already is. Just know that my prayer that I often pray is, God, don't give up on me. And he never has. He shows that in small experiences and grand experiences, through people I talk to, through sermons I watch, or sermons I get to see at church, or through some of the most random things. So I chose God that day. And of course, as we continue talking, like, things didn't necessarily improve. Things got worse. But so back to Aria, we had gotten her almost off of 2 of the meds that she needed to be off of to get home. We had 2 or 3 more weans to go. And on November 28th, actually, I was talking with one of the people on our team about possibly getting to go home right before Christmas. Like, we were excited. We're like, all right, we're going to have Christmas at home, because we didn't get to have Christmas at home the year before. We were in the hospital. What's up?
I don't remember if you said, but so we ended up taking her back to taking her to the 3rd hospital the middle of September.
Yeah.
And this is now the end of November.
Yep.
So, you want me to do this part?
Sure, yeah.
So November 28th, great day. Aria was super happy. Everything looked really good as far as her respiratory status. Medically, she was doing great. That night, or rather early the next morning, so November 29th, at 4 a.m., we got a phone call from Aria's nurse. Again, middle of the night phone calls.
Yeah.
At 4 a.m., got the phone call, and all she would say is we needed to get to the hospital as soon as possible.
I think it was like that things took a turn for the worst.
Well, I don't remember if she even said that or not, but she just told us that we needed to get to the hospital as soon as we can. When we got there was a lot happening. Aria was not in her normal room. In fact, she wasn't even on the same floor of the hospital that we expected her to be on. The staff there had to take us to where she was at, where she had been moved to, and there were a lot of things had changed. And for a while, we did not actually fully understand what had taken place. Since then, we have talked to several different people and gotten an understanding of what actually took place. So the nurse that had Aria that night had never had her before, and so she wanted to go into the room a few minutes ahead of when Aria's next scheduled medication was, to just check in, make sure everything was where it needed to be, make sure that everything was good to go, so that a few minutes later, when it was time to give Aria that next round of medication, it could be smooth and maybe she wouldn't even have to wake her up. But when she got into the room, from what I recall, we were told that she got into the room at 3:58, and Aria was just in a very agitated state. She was rolling back and forth in the crib, just seemed in distress. So she turned on the light and said that Aria had no coloration to her, that she was just like gray, and immediately knew that something was wrong and that this would not be a normal situation. And before any of Aria's alarms even started going off on her monitors or ventilator or any of that, this nurse immediately went ahead and hit the code blue button to get help in there. When other staff came running to assist, they immediately changed out Aria's trach, because with her coloration being gray, and then also since calling the code blue on her monitor, her oxygen levels were dropping quickly. And so immediately the first thought was that her trach has been blocked or clogged, that something's wrong with her airway, she can't breathe. And so they changed out her trach. By the time they had finished that, Aria's heart stopped. They immediately started doing compressions. They did CPR on her for over 30 minutes. At about the 20-minute mark, they did start asking, do we continue? And the staff that was present, they felt that aside from her lungs, that Aria was in a healthy enough state prior to this event that they believed it was worth continuing. They believed that she could still recover if they could get her heart started. Mm. And so they continued for another 10 minutes, at which point they decided that she was gone. They declared a time of death. They turned off her monitors. The chaplain was present. We had not even arrived at the hospital yet, because even though this hospital was closer to home for us, it was still around, and it is still around an hour from our house. But yes, they declared a time of death at 4:38 a.m. Turned off her monitors. The chaplain was present and said a few words, and then had a moment of silence. At the end of that moment of silence, one of the nurses said that she thought she saw some color come back into Aria, starting around like her belly and kind of radiating from there. And so she put her hand around Aria's leg to see if she could detect a pulse. And she spoke up and said, I'm not sure if I'm feeling a pulse or if I'm feeling just my pulse in my fingers or if I'm just really wanting there to be one. And so another nurse stepped forward and checked Aria's arm and said, no, there's definitely a pulse there.
It was just faint at the time.
And so they turned her monitors back on, and Aria's heart had restarted. And so at that point, they quickly moved her to the pediatric ICU, the PICU. And it was, I think, around this time or shortly after that we actually arrived at the hospital. So. I think they had just finished getting, or I think they were just finishing getting her set up in the PICU when we arrived.
Yeah. And then Steve and I took this indifferently. I was quite calm when we arrived, and actually one of the doctors commented on like how calm I was. But Steven was like at a point where it was really hard for him to talk. And the days after that varied. Like, it was really hard.
Some days we basically took turns being each other's anchor. Some days she could not talk about it with any kind of faith, and I had to speak faith into the situation. Other days I could not talk about it, and she had to speak faith into the situation. We joked that it's like we cannot have a bad day on the same day. We've got to schedule this.
Yep. So it was also just hard because she had the best day she'd had in a long time, just for that day to leave her in a hospital bed, paralyzed, sedated, unmoving, worse off than she has ever been. And I wanted to hold on to faith. Some days it was really hard. And like, keep in mind, like I had just, at the beginning of November, we're at the end of it now, I had just made my declaration to God. And I had said in there, like, God, no matter how long this hospital stay is, like, I choose to believe that you're going to get us through this. And now look at us. We're at a whole new level of a hospital stay than we ever expected. It was like a whole new level of like trial. And so some days it was really hard, especially when I looked at her old pictures and I saw her smile gone.
And for a number of weeks, we did not know if we would ever see her smile again. I
even asked God in bitterness, why did you take away her smile? Like, her smile lit up the room. And I was like, but it's gone. And all this happened, it was like, what happened to her being well? What happened, you know, with this and everything? Like, did I hear God? Can I hear God? Just so many questions. Honestly, though, for me, the story was also, it was like too God-filled for me to dismiss it.
There were too many signs along the way.
Yeah. So it was like, it was kind of like a new level of faith. Still a challenge, but a new level of it.
Yeah, painful level of faith.
Even today, when I think back to it, sometimes I can still kind of get bitter with some things, but I remind myself like what happened and how like God was in it and how it happened and that there is a reason for it. I don't know why. I still don't like it sometimes, but God chose us to be her parents. God chose us for her and chose her for his purposes. And we have seen some amazing experiences come out of it, whether it's been through people we meet, conversations we've had, artwork I make, whatever it is.
Different understanding of just faith and a walk with God. Because through this, there have been times where we felt that we had lost our connection to our church, to our family, to our friends.
Like, we've had to kind of be distanced from a lot of people because it's, you know, sick season, sicknesses spread, and it's like, we can't take that to Aria.
And not just sicknesses, but respiratory sickness.
Specifically.
Which is the worst case scenario for Aria, because throughout this, her lungs have been the most impacted illness from her prematurity. Yep. And then it's like, what do you do when you don't have that fellowship to uplift you? What do you do when your church grows in your absence? When you the things that you prayed for to be a part of for months or years, they come to pass while you are not able to partake. Do you still trust God when that happens? Do you still believe that He is good? Do you still believe that, not just do you still believe that He can change things, that He can turn things around, do you still believe that He will? And in all honesty, there have been days where our answer was, I don't know. But ultimately, faith is a choice. Faith is a choice to reject the dark that's in front of your face. That is the only thing you can see.
Yep.
And
one way that I kind of phrased all of this to a friend of mine was, I lost faith. I felt like God could have better prepared us or warned us or something, but really God's big thing is trusting Him in the moment and in the trial. I've taken a lot of time to look into faith, like what faith really means from a biblical, godly perspective, because I thought I had faith in the beginning and it was crushed. I truly believe she would come home with no issues. I never imagined a trach, therapies, cardiac arrest, brain injury, or a loss of her smile. But something I heard someone say who went through some intense things, not someone I personally know, but like I listened to their sermon or their testimony, was, God, thank you for trusting me with this experience. And so I will sometimes say that, and but yeah, that it's been hard, and but also it's been really rewarding to further this. Like we've met some pretty amazing people, like in the PICU. We got to share Aria's story a lot with them, and I got to make drawings for people in the PICU, like people who took care of Aria. Like I really appreciated it, and I couldn't do anything with Aria, so I took some time to draw for them, and they loved it, and it encouraged them, because people who work in the PICU, like it's intense there, and that's their job. Every time they go into work, it's super intense. So it was really nice to be able to be an encouragement to them, and we were used in this like really awful time. And we didn't know what her future would look like at the time, right? Neurologists said they couldn't predict what her future was going to be. They've tried to predict it. They are generally wrong, whether it's that they say too much or too little.
And just to give a picture of where Aria was at this point, she had significant swelling of her brain. What we were told was the different scans showed that she had swelling in every part of her brain except for those essential for sustaining life. So basically we knew that this would not kill her body, but they could not predict what level of functionality she would ever have again. They could tell us that she was not brain dead because there was definitely still activity, but we were told, we don't know if she'll ever be able to talk. We don't know if she'll ever be able to walk. We don't know if she'll be able to do one or the other or both of those things, but just significantly delayed. We don't know if she will ever smile again. We don't know if she'll ever have like an awareness of her surroundings and like motor control. And it's not that they were telling us to be prepared for us to not have those things. It's that they were telling us, we don't know. It could go one way, it could go the other, it could go somewhere in the middle to leaning to more than one side or the other, that there's just no good way to predict it with the type and severity of brain injury that she had from this cardiac arrest, because for half an hour her brain had no oxygen. And one thing the doctors explained to us is that with neuroscience, that there are cases where they predict very optimistically and the patient's actual progress falls significantly short of that. And there are cases where they predict more I guess, pessimistically, and the patient just far exceeds their expectations and makes a full recovery. And there's not a clear understanding of why that disparity exists.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, today she is trying to move around. She's trying to make noises. She's interacting. Mm-hmm. It is...
She doesn't have the motor control that she had before. Prior to the arrest, she could roll all the way onto her back and then roll from her back onto her stomach and then roll back onto her back when she was ready to. She would kick her feet all the time. She loved when we would clip balloons to her socks and let her kick her feet in the bed, and she would laugh at the balloons. At this point, she's trying real hard to lift her head.
She is.
She doesn't have much voluntary movement in her legs right now. We've seen some signs that it's possible, but she's just not able to right now. She is getting better at moving her arms again. She can sometimes intentionally grasp something and hold on to it. Other times she'll hold on to it and then immediately her hand will go limp. And so it'll rest on whatever object with her fingers wrapped around it, but there's no tension. But she has made significant progress. She will track you across the room with her eyes. If you start talking to her, she'll turn and look at you. And
she does smile a lot now.
And yes, she smiles a lot. She is the happiest little kid.
Yes, she is.
Unless you were coming to draw blood, and then she gives you that side eye.
Oh yeah, she started giving people the side eye and
she's
like a
developing an
face.
attitude.
Yeah.
Definitely gets that from mom, not dad.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, it's like, it's great to see that she has made progress, but it also is hard some days because we're like, she's not the same. She isn't.
Even with all that she has done now, she still is significantly short of where she was.
She still has things to overcome. And at the same time, like with all of this, we're still trying to figure out my health concerns. I've recently had like a PET scan done to see if I if I had something specific going on, which I don't have that, but it did show a lot of inflammation in my heart.
They actually thought the test was non-diagnostic, that there was an error with the test, and so they sent it to another specialist out of state, and they came back and said, no, the test is correct. She just has that much inflammation.
Yeah, so they actually had me do it twice because they're like, we need to redo it. And it came back the same. So, yeah, we're still looking at that. And at this point, it looks like it's probably not lupus. I have weird markers for that, but we don't know what it is. We're still monitoring it. And we still...
It may be the early onset of some sort of heart condition, but they don't know which one.
Yeah. And it's like we're still in the midst of struggles right now. We're dealing with some kind of, dealing with insurance right now, trying to figure some insurance things out and some life choices we have to make in the next month or so. And it's all of this for us is still in progress, basically. It's not entirely resolved, but we wanted to give people a full look at our story so far. It's something we've been meaning to do, and it's like, okay, we'll do this at this point. Well, that point may not come, or it keeps getting pushed back, or something keeps happening. And
originally, we wanted to make this video when Aria was back home, and we had a clear roadmap of her treatment, her coming off the ventilator, her no longer needing the trach. And all those things are still possible. All those things are still likely to happen. She's actually made great progress with her respiratory status and her oxygen needs. She is down to needing the least amount of oxygen that she's needed in a long time. Yep. And the pressures that her ventilator is supporting her at are the lowest they've ever been. But we don't know when any of these goals are going to happen. We don't know when she's going to come back home. We don't know when she can come off the ventilator or the trach. We don't know the future. So every time we think we have a window.
Yep. So we're just like, you know what, we're gonna do it. We're gonna make this video and we're gonna let people know what's happened. And I welcome you guys to check out my personal Facebook page, Carlee Woodell, Carlee Woodell, Wooddell. It's a lot of doubles.
It'll be on the
Oh yeah,
the
I can
video.
link it. Yeah, I can do that. I may not accept friend requests if I don't know you. Don't be offended, but you're welcome to go look at it.
I do exist on Facebook, but only technically.
Yeah, he doesn't get on it. You're welcome to go look. I also post art that I make, and I now make commissions, but I don't need to get into all that. This is a testimony video, but it is kind of a part of like me and what I post. I post a ton on Facebook, so I like to post pictures of Aria and art that I make because I can draw on my iPad when I'm there with her, and that's become an avenue for me to kind of de-stress. I have leaned on art, which is actually an answer to a prayer request, and because I've wanted art to become like an avenue for me, so it has, which is great. So yeah, this is kind of where we're at right now and kind of where things like started, and hopefully this has answered for many that have like asked like how things kind of came to be. Hopefully this answers.
Yeah. I don't know that I really have anything else to add other than just we're still in the middle of so much, but God never does anything halfway. He would not have brought us this far just to leave us here. And so if it's not finished, then neither is he.
Yeah.
And so we keep walking this path.
We do. And we thank you guys for your prayers and your encouragement and comments and whatever else. And we thank you guys, and we hope you guys have a wonderful, blessed day.
And thank you if you have had the patience to get through the longest video that we have ever made.
Good job. Thank you guys.